There we go. We should be live. Let's see if this works. Okay. Oh yeah, it's like doing 2.6 megabits, so that should work with the connection. I'm gonna post. I'm gonna post in the office hours. There we go. And post in live stream. Live streams. There we go. Okay, we should be live. Hello. Do we have any people in the stream? Hello. Oh, just this is so hard to
Hello.
read in the quest. Bitcrack IGN. Oh, the quest with the Steam Link streaming doesn't like that blue combination. It's so blurry. We got Mark SH. Hello. Hello.
Hello.
We have another episode of the Resonance. We got Butler. We'll see. Like I kind of mentioned in the post, but we'll see how this goes because I'm currently away from home and I've been having issues with the internet. It's been like really slow for the upload. But it seems it should be fine, but if it explodes, we might need to end this one early, but so far I think it's okay. It's showing green, so I think it should work.
Green for great.
Green. So hello everyone. Hello. Gonna let some people gather in. So let me actually open it. Can you hear us fine as well? Because I'm using a different setup. I'm using the Quest Pro right now. Sounds fine. We got people piling in. Hello.
Yep. Did I get enough sleep? Probably not. But you know, we're out here.
Oh.
Thanks for asking, Jack.
So hello everyone. Welcome to another episode of Resonance. We've missed I think 2 were missed because I was traveling and I was at a con and so on. And this week also been kind of a little bit frantic, so actually I wasn't sure we were gonna do one this week either, but now we can. But the I am bouncing my leg. But now the internet's kind of weird. Like the uploads 10 times slower than it's supposed to be. So we'll see how it goes. Let me know if the stream is having any issues, but so far it seems okay. So I think we should be good to go forward. So yes, so welcome everyone, I'm Froox, I'm here with Sire. We're doing another episode of Resonance where you can ask pretty much anything you want about Resonite, about the theme. You can even ask casual questions too as well if you want. The only thing, make sure to put a question mark at the end of your question, that way it kind of pops on our thing here so we don't miss it in the chat. So we should be able to get started. We don't have any advanced questions this week because I wasn't sure we were gonna do a resonance, I didn't make one. Probably do one for the next one, or maybe it's gonna be a bit frantic for the next month or so. So there might be some more kind of there might be some more resonances. Oh, thank you so much for the subscription and the cheers, the bits. But it might also be more frantic. There might be some that we skip, if there's any kind of things happening. So just bear with us for the next one. However, I do actually have an announcement, sort of announcement. I'm gonna make a proper one, but we have a new subreddit that's at reddit.com/r/resonite. And one of the things we'll be doing is doing AMAs. Ask me anything kind of threads. I'll do make an announcement sometime during next week. It's gonna happen sometime during next week, so you can ask questions there as well. So it's gonna be another kind of format. This one's probably not gonna be as regular as the resonances and as the office hours, but we did talk with the rest of the team. The moderation team is also interested in doing one. The art team, they're interested in doing one. So there's probably going to be more. So if you want to ask questions in a different format, there's going to be another opportunity for that. And it's going to be, kind of more text-based, answering. Where you can post a bunch of questions, and then there's going to be time when we're going to be answering them live, but we can also answer, the ones that have been written there. And we're probably also getting more people using the subreddit too, just kind of opening more avenues of communication. But yeah, we don't have any advanced questions, so we can jump straight into the live stream questions. And again, make sure to put a question mark if you want to ask something. That way it kind of pops in our thing. With that, we should be able to get started. Am I forgetting anything? And I don't know if I'm forgetting anything.
I don't think so.
We'll figure it out as we go. But yeah, we're also going to be showing the questions ooh, I'm not used to the Quest controllers. As I was asking questions, yeah, I tend to bounce my legs sometimes. I usually don't because I don't have a full body setup with me, so I'm just kind of lounge. So I'm not super used to these controllers. Granik is asking Schnoppet. Do you have a Schnoppet for... Do you have a Schnoppet?
Do I have a Schnoppet today? Let me think for a second. No, I don't know if I do. I think you guys have been good this week.
This is your judgment. Thank you. There was Nuki Conrad. Thank you.
Yeah.
I don't have one is a minor, one is but it's it's with people when people ask things being kind of vague. Where oftentimes I have this thing where somebody asks me something and I'm I can see 10 different ways to interpret what you're asking. Provide more context with your questions. That makes kind of things a little bit easier because usually I have to kind of be well, do you mean this thing, or do you mean this thing, or do you mean this other thing, and it kind of becomes a thing. So when you ask things, provide more context, which actually helps us for this thing, because this happens on the stream as well. When somebody asks a question, I'm I don't know the context of what we're asking. So if you're asking a question, it helps to provide more context. And if you're asking a follow-up question, provide a context too, because sometimes there's a whole bunch of questions between your previous one and the next one. So it's easier, if you don't provide a context, we might be I don't remember what was your original thing anymore, so we won't be able to answer that question, so context helps. And we got big one right from the start from Jack the Fox Otter. Jack the Fox Otter is asking, can you rant a bit about spatial variables? I already have a lot of potential use case ideas, but I'm curious what applications you see for them. So spatial variables, for those of you, I'm gonna put this here, I guess. For those of you who don't know, it was a planned feature that was kind of separate. It was actually on my list of things I really want to add, because I feel it's a very powerful system for creators. It's going to open up a lot of new options. I really wanted to add it. And it's also not very big, implementation wise. There's not super much, that it needs. A lot of the building blocks are kind of already there. And when I'm working on the audio system, I needed a system, for the audio listeners in the scenes to figure out what audio effects, specifically what the reverb effect is available in certain area, and then blend it. And to do that, I would have to implement a system that would be kind of like spatial variables. And I had two choices. I could just implement one that's specifically just for reverb, specifically for audio. That's the only thing it can be used for. Or I could generalize it and just use spatial variables. So I was let's get bigger bang for the buck. Let's get more out of the time I invest into the system, and I'm just gonna implement the spatial variables and then use it for the system. Ooh, thank you. I don't know what it was. Oh, Nikicon's writing again. Interesting. I don't know we can do that. But yes, what spatial variables are is you can essentially define. I'm actually gonna grab my brush. Where's my brush? They allow you to define values in space. And it happens in 3D space. I'm gonna draw it in 2D to make it a little bit easier to understand. Let's see, where's my brush? There's my brush. So imagine you can literally say, okay, at this point in space, there's a value. Like, this can be a sphere. In this case, it's a circle because 2D. So like at this point in space, there's a value, and maybe there's a different value over here. And maybe there's another one here. There's like a cube. And say like this is just a color or floating point. It can be any type of value, like, kind of similar to dynamic variables, except instead of them being bound by hierarchy, they are bound by space. So like when you want to sample spatial variables, you literally just say, I want to sample what value is at this point. So say like this sphere has value, 10, this one has like 5, and this one's 3. And by default, it's 0. So like if you sample here, like, you sample here, you're gonna get 0. If you sample here, you're gonna get 10. And actually, let me make this overlap as well so I can show you a thing. If you sample here, you get 5. If you sample here, you get 3 during the whole volume. And the interesting thing for value, for like numeric values, you can also determine how they're combined. So for example, if you sample here where there's an overlap, depending on how you sample it, like you can configure it, you can have it the values together. So if you sample here, you'll get 15. And I just realized I'm drawing everything backwards for you. 15, 10, and 3. Actually, I can do this. There we go. Yeah, there we go. So now it should be the right way. So you can, sample here, you get 15, or maybe you say, I want this one to have higher priority than this one, and the high priority one wins, which means like if this one is high priority, you get 10 until you move here, and then you get 5. Or you like, so like, or you can, for example, say you want to blend between them, so you get like, something like 12, or something, depending on where you are specifically. So it kind of interpolates based on, how far you are from each. So that's like, the kind of the gist of it. It's like you literally can define values in space and then be kind of combined, in different ways. And the value can be anything. Like here, this is the number, but it can be a color. It can be a spherical harmonic, if you want to like do like ambience. It can be a reference to a texture or like, object or something. You have like lots of, pretty much like any value that works in Resonite, you can make a spatial variable out of it and then sample it. They're also named, so you can like, these need to be like all have the same name, so you can have like a bunch of different ones that each has a different name and they're kind of separate from each other. Another cool thing with how the system works is, in this example, I made the values be constant, but you can actually also have the value vary throughout the shape. So instead of, let me actually just remove some of these to make it a little bit clearer. Actually, let me just clear this out. I'm just gonna redraw everything. So say, there we go. Say you have the sphere. So even when the value is constant, one of the things you can do, you can say like, the value is going to be 5 throughout the whole sphere. You can actually define a region where it blends. So it can be like, there can be like a region. And if you sample here, so say the value is, 5. The value is 5 throughout the whole thing, but there's like a blend region. So like if you're here, you're gonna get 0, and then here you're gonna get, 5. And I kind of want to add a brush that lets me reverse things. Here you're gonna get 5, and you're like in the middle, you get like, 2.5. So like it's like, a smooth layering between the two. And it's actually how the reflection, not reflection, reverb zones are gonna work, where there's gonna be a sphere which defines a reference to the reverb effect, and then the blending area is gonna be fed into that reverb to determine how strong it should be. And and it's like how the reverb zones are just a specific use case of spatial variables, but you can use it for anything, any data type, anything you want. So blending is like one of the things you can do, like, for example, with constant value. And if you have like, if you have like multiple of the spatial variables overlapping, the blending can be combined multiple ways. If you're adding the values together, you're literally gonna be like, if it's 2.5, it's gonna be 2.5 plus whatever else is at this point. You can also say the higher priority wins. So like if you have like, 2 regions, which have like both like blend region, then if you're like in the overlap, then whichever one has like higher blend is gonna have higher priority and gonna get that value. You can like do average, like weighted average of the values. So like it's gonna average them out, like so you're gonna get one that's like blend of all of them with the weight of each value being determined by the blend. But you can also, separately from the blending, you can also define that the value actually changes. So you can, for example, say right at the edge of the sphere, the value is gonna be 10. So you're gonna get 10, and let's say here it's gonna be 50. So as you sample through that volume, here you're gonna get 10, here you're gonna get like, halfway between 10 and 50, which I don't know, it's 30 something, I guess. And here you're gonna like, get 50. And there's also a bunch of different shapes that define, different ways to vary the value throughout the, throughout the thing. So for example, like there's also like a box spatial variable, and this box spatial variable, it also has like a blend region. But also, like, there's multiple ways. Like, there's like, I've already implemented one which uses a 3D texture. So you can use 3D texture, and the value you get is literally the value from the 3D texture wherever, wherever that box is. So like if you have a texture, that's going to give you the value. The other one for the box is, there can be a gradient. So like, for example, and the gradient can be aligned certain ways. For example, it's this way. Maybe say, here it's 10, and here it's going to be 50. So there's lots of ways we can like, make different shapes that change how the value, they actually change what value you get throughout the specific shape. And it's on top of like, having multiple shapes that can overlap with each other, and give you like stuff. So that's kind of the gist of, what spatial variables can do. But the other part is, how can you use them? There's already like the example I've given with, with the reverb zones, and it's one of the kind of like excuses I've used to like add it. But there's lots of different use cases. For example, like say you want to do environmental effects. You want the ambient lighting to change based where the user is. This makes it super easy because if you have a world, maybe say like you have a region here, and this has like bright lighting, outdoors lighting, and you have like a room here, and you say the room, this is darker lighting, and you give this a higher priority. So like when the user is in blend between the two, this one ends up winning over this one, even though they overlap. And maybe there's like, maybe there's like a super dark room here, so you put one here, and maybe there's like, a region here where you want different lighting, and you just define these spaces, and then you sample whatever, say spherical harmonic you get, depending on when the user's head is. So say as the user is walking around, you just keep sampling, and you literally just drive the ambient lighting of the world where the user is, and you don't need to worry about any spatial queries. This system, it uses the Beppu acceleration structure in the background, which makes the queries super fast. So as you move around, you just keep getting different values depending where you are. So you can use it for environmental effects, and it doesn't have to be just ambient lighting. It can be, for example, sounds. Like you want to like modify how loud some sound is. Like say like you're making a club. You have a room, and maybe there's like speakers here. There's like speakers, and you want it to be quieter here. There's a room. So like if the user is here, there's a spatial variable that says, the volume of these should be really, really high. But once you get into this room, you want it to be way lower, like even lower than, the distance attenuation would make it. Or maybe you want to blend it into like a muffled version. You have like, a version of the track that's kind of like, like pass through a low pass filter. And once we also get like low pass filters, so you can do it in real time, you can feed that into the low pass filter. We can have a value that feeds it into the low pass filter and automatically blends the effect as you kind of move around. So that's another thing you could do. You could have like, it can be literally anything in the world. Like, say you want to change the lights in the world. Or another example, you want to do culling system. You can literally define a bunch of shapes in the world, which essentially say the user is the user in this room, is the user in this room, and then you just derive the boolean of like different places based on what value you sample where the user is, and then like you enable and disable different parts of the world. So calling system is another great example. Another cool thing is say you want to make interactive systems that are very interoperable. Say like you make something like a torch, make a torch. And then like you have like, somebody makes like a fireplace. So there's like, a fire. And what they do is they can define this as a spatial variable named fire or hot or whatever, you want to do. So there's fire. And make sure you duplicate this one. And this torch, it samples spatial variable, at its tip. And if it detects that fire is above a certain point, it will activate itself on fire. And then the user all needs to do is just put in their fire, and now it works. And if you have worlds where people set up, spatial variables with this, now those are all interoperable. You don't need to do anything extra. You just say, what is the value of fire at this point in space? And if it's above a certain point, like I'm gonna set myself on fire. And even cooler, you can, have the torch have a spatial variable that's fire. And once it's on fire, that's also going to output, that it's on fire. You put it next to another torch, and that's going to set it on fire. So, like, you can have systems, interact with each other without having to, like, manually sort of link them together. So it, like, allows for a lot of, like, really cool kind of spatial interactions like this. Another cool thing is, you could, for example, you have worlds where you want to determine, like, you have, like, when to switch to a swimming system. So like you have like, you have like, say like a pool here, like, there's this pool and there's like, some water around, so like this is a beach and this is the water. So you just say this is spatial variable, water, for example. So you're just gonna sample what is the value of water here, and maybe there's another water here. So there's another water, and if you detect it's above a certain point, you switch on a system. Once it goes below a certain value, you switch the system off. And it becomes as simple as, as just driving a value from a specifically named variable. So there's a lot of like, and this is just kind of scratching the surface. Like I think like once this is like added and everybody can like work with it, it's gonna be huge. Like it's gonna make so many systems much easier to make and make them much more interoperable with each other. I've already seen like people were talking about like, making standards for like, common things like, water, witness. Another thing, you can make a thing on your avatar which just samples, what's the amount of water. Once it crosses a certain point, maybe you trigger a effect which makes your avatar look wet. Like, so like, and that helps like enhance realism. You go into the water, your avatar is wet, you step out, and maybe like, your wetness drops. I've already seen some people kind of use that kind of system, but there's not really a way to make it like very interoperable with things, and this system makes that much, much, much easier. And I think like a lot of once you're able to play with it, which you'll be able to very soon, people are gonna discover even more like really cool like use cases for it, and probably a lot of cursed ones too. Christians are gonna get like
gravity.
Oh yeah, like, that's another thing. You could literally just say, define a spatial variable that just is a vector and like, is like this is the gravity that should be here. So like if you're here, maybe the gravity is down, but like once the player's here, the gravity is maybe this way. And it's just like it makes the setup so much easier because like all you do is just ask what is the float 3 at this point of name gravity, and once you go to here, you get a different value. You just drive whatever thing on locomotion module you need, and it just works. It just works.
Yeah, you don't gotta do math. You don't gotta do a bunch of math to do it anymore.
Yeah. It makes a lot of things like way simpler for like interoperable systems, and makes it much faster because like it reduces the acceleration structure. So there's a lot of like use cases for this, and I think there's gonna be even more like once you get your hands on it. I think it's gonna be like very, very powerful system, like kind of like on the level like like when dynamic variables were introduced, that kind of changed a lot how people build things, and I think this is gonna be another really, really good tool in the creator's toolbox that's going to make it easier to build things and make them more interactive and more interoperable with each other.
Oh yes, I'm very excited. There's like so many. I was talking with like Jack earlier today, and he was like, these are like so powerful that like I don't even, there are things that like I don't even know I could do with them yet. I'm sure, like there's so many. It's just such a broad use case that I don't even know what all they could be used for, and I'm eager to find out.
I really like these kinds of systems because it's like it's been relatively simple to implement. It took me like a day or two, I think. I haven't like super explicitly tracked it, but like it didn't take like super long time, and it's like such a simple system, but like so powerful. I feel like the 2 days, like it was kind of made easier because I had to like generalize some. Like I made essentially a spatial collection built around the bedproof physics because it's also used for some other audio stuff, which makes it easy to just say there's like this object and it's like in this space and I can sample, like, I can do spatial queries very easily. So there's that made the implementation also like kind of quicker because I had to do that. But also that wasn't super big thing because there was already part of a generalization that I did for the dynamic bones a while back. So it's just kind of building on top of that. I was gonna say another thing, I forget what it was. But it is gonna be like, I think, very like game changing system for like building a lot of things on Resonite. And that's kind of like one of the reasons I was like, I should just implement that one because that way, like, like I can use it to make, the reverb zone. So it's something I needed. And usually when we build things for Resonite, we kind of look, how do we implement things in a way that, like, it's not just that one particle system. It doesn't have just that one use case, but it has like a million other use cases, and it was like a perfect opportunity to do so. And that way, like, we get like much more value from the time because like our time is very limited on what it can do, and there's something of that value that we can do, like, to like supercharge, like the power to have like to build things on Resonite, like, we want to do it. Another cool thing is like there's also another sampler that I added. It's like a Boolean sampler, so you can, for example, say I want like this Boolean to be true if there's any true value, like, in the space, or if all of them are true, or if, like, none of them are true, or even do like XOR, like exclusive, like OR, so like each Boolean potentially flips it. It's like, that space. It can also be used for other cool things. Like if you have like, overlapping region, so say like you have like here and here, which can be useful, for example, for the calling, systems, is like, you're gonna get through in all of this.
Spatial hashing.
Spatial hashing, oh my god. But yeah, it's I think it's gonna be like pretty big, and I can't wait like what people will make like once you get your hands on it, which would like probably tomorrow, maybe tomorrow's Monday. Yeah, probably tomorrow,
It's
like on the
not Monday.
pre-release build, because I'll have a pre-release build for more testing for audio, which is another thing, but I've already did a ramble for it. But yes, spatial variables.
A pre-release just for us.
Yes. Well, it's gonna have like other audio soon, audio based, because like I did rework a bunch of things, so that needs to be testing. But it also has spatial variables, so you'll be able to play with both. So the next question is from Bitcrack IGN. How's the audio rework going? Well, this is a good segue. How's the audio rework going? What are you working on right now? And pretty much what I said. Like I'm getting the reverb zones like working. I have like most of it working. I have like there's like a new system where you actually have a component which determines where you hear from. It's like a listener. I've reworked all the things. And like the listener, it has a list of effects that can be applied. Now, the only thing that's missing is kind of putting it together. So like it essentially has like the spatial variable driver that drives the list of the effects based on the variables it samples. It's like super easy to set up. And the other thing is I need to convert the old reverb zones to the new system, which already like Cyro did like a bunch of work to like map the old settings to the new one, so that already saves tons of time. So like I don't think it's gonna take super much time. So I think I'll have like the reverb zones like fully working sometime tomorrow. And then the other major thing that's missing is gonna be Doppler effect. I think it's not gonna take super long either, but I'm still kind of like fuzzy on some of the details of that, so I'll see how that goes. And then it's like fixing up some other like minor issues, some like problems that have been kind of reported. So like once those are fixed up, like that should be it. Like we'll do like more testing, see if there's any more problems, but I think it's possible we'll get like audio sometime next week or very probably the week after, if not the next week. So I think it's getting close. And once that is done, like it's gonna be the split ending. It's gonna be working on actually putting Froox engine out of Unity and getting the big performance boost, which is gonna take some time because there's like things need to be reworked there, but that's pretty much gonna be the final phase at the end of which we'll get a huge performance boost from the Net 9.
Like, it's crazy to know that like we're pretty much just like potentially a few weeks out from the splitting starting. It's crazy.
Yes, it's very very close. Like it's been a very very long project. Like this is I think this has been the biggest undertaking for Resonite, like a Froox engine in general, like that I've taken like ever. But it's gonna be really worth it because once we do the switch, like I feel it's gonna be very freeing. Like one, we get like a little more performance, and now we can also use much more modern language. We can use better tooling. We can use modern libraries for stuff that we're not able to, and like we're just not gonna be like held back as much anymore. So I think that's like it's gonna be pretty big game changer. Next question's from OZ. OZ is asking, will there be a way to visualize spatial variables? Also, what shapes will be exposed for them? I'm really excited for them. So right now I don't have a way to visualize. We could maybe add like a quick one, the same way like the colliders have them. Right now, the shapes I implemented are spheres and a box, but I would also want to do like a bunch of others, doing like a cylinder, capsule, what other basic shapes are there? I can't think of basic shapes.
A cylinder, a capsule.
Cone, we could do cone. Well, cone is also like a specialization. We do conical frustum, that's like a specialization, like where just cone and cylinder are just special cases of it.
Yeah.
Oop. Yeah, but like we can. It's also like another thing, like once we add them, that's not the end of it. Like we can keep adding more shapes and more like different ways to like vary the values in them. So, for example, like one thing for the box. Where should I put my brush? Did I delete it? One other thing, for example, for the box is there's the gradient. And I'm drawing a very bad box. So you have like you have your box. Let me make it. There we go. Save your box, and you can define a gradient, but the gradient is just in one direction. Or you can define a 3D texture, but then you need a 3D texture. We also want to have variants that like the texture is defined on one of the faces, and it's like actually there's another box where you can define value on each of the vertices, so the value is like kind of interpolated between them. So that's already implemented. But another one I can see us implementing is you define the texture on one of the axes. So you have a texture, for example, on here, and then like the value you get in the volume is gonna be whatever the projection to the texture is. So there's lots of different ways to add more, and like you'll be able to like make feature requests if you want like a particle shape or particle way to sample it. We can add it. It's relatively easy to add them into the system. Adding new shapes is a little bit more difficult because there's like a little bit of extra math that needs to be figured out. Like for example, for the boxes, I had to add algorithm that figures out like the closest distance, but also like it's not a huge thing. But like one that figures closest distance, based on a point. So we could do maybe convex house too. Typically, like the whatever basic shapes like you would have like in physics system, like they're probably gonna be spatial variables. And next question is a long one. Next question is from, actually I can't read it right that way. Sorry, I'm gonna covering you. Next question is from Bitcrack IGN. This is a what-if question. I'm much aware of the idea can change in the future. This is just to satisfy my burning curiosity for now. If the workshop comes around, what do you think you'd do in the event of an asset, material, sound, etc. someone used in their items, words has been deleted? Most likely because of copyright violation. Will you notify the user, give them time to replace it before deleting it, replace the asset with placeholder or missing one? So this is not even like a workshop thing. This is more of like, well, I don't want to say like DMCA specifically, but DMCA is one of the mechanisms. But essentially, it's like a copyright issue, and it kind of depends how the user goes about it. If they file a DMCA, that's like a bit of a process, and in that case, I don't know from the top of the head, but I think we probably need to like delete it right away or like make it inaccessible, and then have like a system for an appeal so we can kind of restore it. So with the DMC, if it's actual DMC claim, then the law, we essentially have to follow the law, what it says. And I don't know from the top of my head what it is right now exactly, but I'm pretty from the discussions we had, I'm pretty sure we essentially need to block it right away and provide appeal option. So in that case, if somebody does do that filing, our hands are kind of tied in how we approach it. That's kind of prescribed by the law itself. If it's more of a support ticket claim, so we're not invoking specific process, that gives us more flexibility how to deal with the situation. In which case, we can actually contact the user, be like, hey, there's this claim, do you have anything, can you replace it, or do you have anything to prove you own the license to it? So it gives a little bit more kind of flexibility on how to deal with that. We'll probably also formalize it a bit, so we have our actual system where we can make reports. We also plan to have a licensing system which is going to provide more explicit control on who owns what assets and how can they be used. So ideally, those assets would already be registered, and that would determine how they can be used. With having still support tickets for disputes and stuff like that. But yeah, it'll depend on the exact process. Next questions from Baplar. Are you keeping with the new developments in VR software space outside of Resonite? Of course. If so, are there any interesting feature stuff you've seen that you'd be interested in looking into Resonite in the future? So it kind of depends what you mean. If you mean stuff like standards, for example, OpenXR, engines and so on, or you mean other ideas from other platforms and so on. Yeah, we kind of keep an eye, what's kind of happening and so on. I guess the biggest one would be having OpenXR support, but it's also we need to switch the rendering engine for that. In order to kind of thank you for the Terraman VR for the subscription. Thank you. But yeah, for the one, I would say that's the biggest one that we kind of want, just kind of be able to switch to more modern kind of standards. But it's also a big thing is we need to switch to the rendering engine, so it's not a thing we're just yeah, we're just gonna flip a switch and that's done. Before asking to clarify, any feature in a software game that made you think that's cool? Should it? Yeah, there's Resonite 2. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of stuff. A lot of Resonite is kind of inspired by a lot of other software and games I played. But
Minecraft
is actually a big one. It's actually one of the reasons I'm really looking forward to implementing a terrain system, because I want to be able to make big worlds and make them editable, and even make ones they can be voxel based, where you'll see the voxels, or it can be smoothed out terrain, but kind of using similar things. And I just really when while back when I implemented Minecraft importer, I actually dug into the substrate the Anvil format that Minecraft uses, and I got a bunch of inspiration from that, how they handle the terrain data, how has the format even evolved over time. Because there were little interesting things, how they handled the blocks, where it just used to be an ID, a byte, then that wasn't enough, so they added another byte, and the problem was people made mods, so they would use a number for a specific block, and then we'd have a collision, when it became used officially. So in Anvil, they actually have a palette where the palette like has strings, where for example says Minecraft stone, Minecraft dirt, Minecraft something, and the mods they can add like their own blocks into the palette, and that way don't collide with each other. So there's like bits like that where I'm like, okay, like this is interesting how they approached it, and it gives me some ideas how we'll approach ours. And usually, we'll try to like generalize it a lot more. So it's like it can be used for a lot more use cases, because like for a lot of the games, a lot of features they made specifically for that game, and it's kind of hard to use it for other stuff. But with Resonite, we try to make systems as generic as possible, so it can be used for lots of different things. Because like we're not trying to be like any specific game, we try to be more like an engine where you can build a lot of cool things. But yeah, there's a lot of them. There's like small things, there's like big things. It's a harder like thing of them because just like there's lots. It also depends like what you consider a big development, because like some things can be like really small and neat. Like another one actually also comes from Minecraft is like when in the Vivecraft mod, which I really like to play, like it automatically switches you between VR and desktop as you take the headset off and on. And I was like, that's cool, I'm stealing that. And it's a small thing, but like I was like, I like that, so I'm gonna add it here as well. So yeah, there's a lot. Sometimes it's also like question of time, because it's like like I'm still like, oh, that's a cool thing. Like I would want us to have that, but like we don't have time right now for that. Nokikon is asking, you're not rateable? I'm not really
I don't know.
sure. Like I don't know how
that
it
seems
comes
like
from.
an issue. It seems
Yeah.
like a bug or something.
Like I've seen you rate us like twice, so I think it worked. Like it showed on the thing.
Yeah.
Next question is from AlexBoot23. I recently made a voice command ring where I can do certain things with like open inspector, create cube, and make it explode. I made the explode only be used if you are the host, but that means it will not work on headlesses, so I thought maybe I could check a user's role. Is there a reason why there's no node for that, or was it because it was never needed? So it's actually one of the things, like we actually had requests for that, and the problem is like the roles, they're essentially system designed for security, and checking the role like that, like checking like the name of the role, it has a lot of pitfalls. And when it comes to like security, we try to avoid like anything that has a lot of pitfalls, because like it can lead to making systems that are fundamentally not secure and that cannot be secured, and that could even break. Because, for example, even just a simple example, some people can, in their worlds, they rename their roles. So if they do that, now your system is kind of broken, or it's not working right. Or maybe somebody makes a system which, like, hijacks whatever test they're using for the security, and because, like, there's not really an actual security check, it's just sort of, a soft one, is very easy to bypass. And now we're in a situation where, like, if we add it, people will have certain expectations. They'll have expectations that this is a secure mechanism, and we know it's not going to be a secure mechanism, so we don't want to add stuff like that where there would be expectation that we cannot fulfill. So for security, we actually want to like introduce like more robust systems where we can make those guarantees. We can be like, okay, if you use this gives you these guarantees. And it's probably going to be a little more complicated than like, a role check or something, that cannot be really tampered with. Whenever it comes like, to security, like the standard that like, something needs to pass, is much higher. Nokisun saying,
just the raid thing again.
The raid thing, like, we've seen the raid happen like on the thing, so I think it worked. Nukikun's asking, can you give an explanation of using spherical harmonics for ambient light? I have basics down, but I still feel a little confused. So this is a good example of like, where it would help to have more context. Like, what are you confused by? Because right now, I don't know what part is confusing you, which makes it kind of hard to like, answer this question. But the gist of it is like spherical harmonics, they're like a way to encode low-frequency information, directional information. So, like, you know, if I simplify it into 2D, you know, like it's literally like if you have, like, you know, this can be sphere in 3D, but like in 2D it's gonna be a circle. And if you sample it based on the direction, you can get different values from it. So, you know, you get like one value here, maybe like you get 1, this is bright over here. You sample it here, this is gonna be like, you know, half, it's gonna be 0.5. Oop. And I drew it poorly. So over here, you're gonna get like, you know, I cannot draw backwards. Over here is gonna be 0.5, you know, maybe over here it's gonna be bright again, and you're gonna get like, you know, 0.7. So it's just like, depending on the direction you sample it in, you get different values. And spherical harmonics is just a mechanism to be able to encode that information very efficiently on a sphere. So when you look at the surface of an object, for example, if I make, say, a sphere, actual sphere, where is it? I'm just gonna make a sphere. Sphere, there we go. So if you consider the sphere, actually, let me just select that. For each point on the sphere, you know, you have something called surface normals, and the normals is essentially a vector that's perpendicular to the surface. So like one, you know, one that's here, and like over here it's going to be like this, and over here it's going to be like this, and these normals are essentially like a direction, and this direction is used to sample that spherical harmonics to get like, you know, what ambient lighting should be at this point on the mesh. And that's pretty much all it is, you know, you have the spherical harmonics encoding what ambient light is in that particle direction, and then when the object is being rendered, the normal is used to sample the spherical harmonics to determine what ambient light you get in the direction. So I hope this kind of helps. It would help if you provide a little bit more, like, you know, what part is confusing you, because I don't know if this addresses that or not, but I hope they don't anyways. There's also like another video we actually did on spherical harmonics on our YouTube channel, so that also might be worth checking out. Let's see. Next question is from Powderpop. How resilient is Resonite against model ripping? I've heard that Resonite stores models in mesh X. Would you say this is a form of security through obscurity? Pretty much every single game or software platform, like, security by obscurity is the best you can get. There's like no way, if you want the model to be displayed and rendered, it needs to be on the machine, it needs to be, you know, present in some format, but at some point it needs to be decoded and put onto the GPU so it can be displayed, which means the code to actually decode it is also present on your system. So the only thing preventing someone from ripping it is figuring out like where that system is, and there's only a question of time. So there's no platform, there's no software, there's no game that can do better than security by obscurity on this kind of thing. Like, look at it this way. There's, like, you know, games that took hundreds of millions of dollars to develop. And they use, you know, they used anti-cheat software. They use, like, you know, DRM that also cost, like, you know, millions, dozens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars to implement. And people still rip models out of these games. Like, there's not really a way you can, like, you know, prevent it from happening. So yes, it is a security to obscurity, but you literally cannot get better than that. Like, the only way to get better than that would be for the user to not have the model. And if you wanted to do that, like, the only way you could really realistically do that is that you would actually never run the game on the user's computer. You would run it on some cloud server that you trust, and then stream the video to the user. But they're quite, like, you know, that would have like latency, that would have like huge infrastructure costs, so like it's not realistic. So yeah, like it's it's just a matter of, like, people taking time to correct the format and put things together. There's like
Like,
one thing that we can do that it doesn't prevent the ripping, but it prevents, misuse, and it's going to be the license system. Because the license system that we are planning to implement, it's going to say, this asset is owned by this user, and it's going to, use like some hashing, so it can, like, determine this is the same asset. So if you rip something and then you try to use it on Resonite again, Resonite will be able to determine this is the same asset, you're not allowed to use it. And it can be, some mechanisms, like, even if you modify it a little bit, it's gonna be like, okay, like, it's similar asset, I'm gonna prevent you from using it. If you, try to modify your client, the other clients, if you try to join worlds, you don't have control over those, so those can check, and they can be, okay, this user's trying to use this asset, do they have permission to do that? They don't, I'm gonna kick them out. So that makes it much harder for the user to actually do something with it. So it doesn't prevent the ripping, but it helps, it makes the life more difficult for people ripping to actually use the model. So it kind of decreases, sort of the incentive to rip things, because now you have to deal with more. And the other aspect is because even this system is not going to be perfect. Like, somebody can rip something and modify it enough so the system will think it's a different, asset, it's a different texture, different mesh. We'll have like a system to, like, report it. So, like, if somebody reports like this person's using a stolen asset, we can, like, look at them and be like, okay, these are actually the same, even though the system doesn't think it's the same. Like, we have a human verify, these are the same ones. We're gonna mark this one as the same. Make it so the user cannot use it, and maybe they also, get some kind of punishment. They get like banned or something for, ripping ripping assets. So the main thing, like, we can really do is, like, make people's life more difficult with stuff like that. But ultimately, we cannot promise, that the models cannot be ripped. But also, nobody else can make that promise. And if they do, I don't think they're being honest. Like, sorry, we're gonna say
yeah.
something.
Oh no, I forgot.
It's okay.
I totally forgot. But no, I agree. Like there really is no other like platform that can say something like that. I like can't think of one that says that in good faith.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a thing. Like, and for us, like, it's like we just want to be honest about it. Like what options we offer and what we want to do in the future. And one thing we know for sure is, like, we cannot prevent, you know, we cannot prevent the ripping from happening altogether, but we can do things to fight it and to make, like, the life of people who rip things, like, more difficult. But there's nothing that would give you anything better than security through obscurity. Like, like, for some things, that's the best you can get. And even then, like, it becomes a space race, because it's like, if people figure stuff out, okay, maybe we can change things up. But there's only so much we know we can do, because if we change it up, it just takes time for somebody to figure a different way, how to attack the new system. And it just becomes this never ending, like, space race. Nukikun's asking, can you walk us through basic setup with particles? Maybe show us how to add some simple effects. I understand the basis of Photon does, but it's a bit more than the old system. I think we could do, like, a quick demonstration, maybe. I don't know how, like, involved we want to get, because there's, like, a lot you can do with Photonism, so just checking how much questions we have. It's quite a lot, so
Oh
we might
man.
there's a lot of questions.
Oh my god. There's
Yeah,
so
there's a
many.
how much time we have? So we've been
We
for
have
an
about an
hour.
hour.
Okay, we're gonna do a very quick showcase. Actually, actually, wait.
I
We
would
we
like
did a
to.
showcase. We did a showcase, like, on a video. Go on our YouTube channel. There's a video on Photon Dust that has a showcase. Watch that one. I'm sorry, I'm
Yeah,
not gonna do a live
the
demonstration. I feel it's kind of better because, like, we have a lot of questions in the queue, and this might take a bit. And we already kind of did a showcase a while back, so I recommend watching that.
yeah, sorry.
Nukikun's also asking, also, when does photo does become multi-threaded? It's multi-threaded from the start. It was never single-threaded. Like, it's
Like,
designed.
well, what they're asking is like, when does it start like making more and more like threads? At what is the threshold for that? I think is what they're asking.
There's no threshold. It's just multi-threaded. Like,
Because I know like if you have a few particles, it's only going to use one because it only needs one.
it's still
But if
like
you start
using like
having
other
more,
threads. But we also have like multiple, like, even multiple, like, it schedules things. So like it's gonna schedule jobs like to always process a bunch of particles. So like you're not gonna get, like, if you have like 10 particles in the system, you're not gonna get like one thread for each particle. Like, it does a bunch. I think it's like something like 2048 like per batch. But even that is like multi-threaded because like there's multiple stages that happen, and those also can happen at different threads. And also, if you have multiple parallel systems, those are gonna be parallelized. Like, it's multi-threaded. Like, it's
yeah.
um.
Hmm.
Next question is a bit. Crack IGN is asking, I know so far with spatial variables you can blend value between two shapes, but could spatial variables allow for point shapes? So the sample value would be a blend between 2 points. That doesn't
That's
really make much
that's like what
sense
the
to me.
sphere one is.
Well, I don't quite understand what you're asking because so one, you can, like, it's not just blending between two shapes. You can blend values between arbitrarily how many shapes you have in a particular point. Like, if you have 100 shapes overlapping in a single point, you're gonna have a blend of values for all the, for all the 100 shapes. Um,
Like
I
you
don't know.
can you can do it with like a radius on like the sphere, like how close you are to the center of the sphere, if that's what you mean.
Yeah, I don't really know what you mean. Like, you need to clarify it because when you say between 2 points, I don't know. I don't know what it means because
Like
like
a
when you
a
say two
point.
points, I imagine like 2 points, but like what's the
There's no
shape?
volume.
Yeah, there's like no volume
Yeah, like
to
a
it.
point.
So, and like
Yeah.
if you cannot have like a spatial value that's a point because like even if you're like infinitesimally like in different point than this is, then like you're not gonna hit that point because it's infinitesimally small. So like it needs to have some volume to it, and then you can sample it within that. But I would say probably clarify the question a bit. Nuking is asking
Yeah,
like, when
that's
does it split
yeah.
from the main thread? Pretty much like most of the work it does is like separate from the main thread. The main thing it does on the main thread is just kind of collect the values. Like, it has like a sort of like synchronization point. So what it does, it like it collects all the information from the data model. That's all the setup, the styles, how many particles should emit, and so on. And actually, it sort of creates a snapshot of that information, and then it schedules jobs on the background threads. And there's like a whole bunch of processing. It does all the simulation, all the updates, everything that needs to happen. Until it finishes the buffer. Then it takes the buffer. The buffer needs to be converted for rendering. It also happens multi-threaded, and once like all that is done, it synchronizes with the Unity thread, and updates the Unity data for rendering. And once it's done, then like in the next update cycle, it can it essentially tells it, okay, I'm done, and then the update cycle can be, okay, this is create a new snapshot of like everything and spin off like another update. So there's actually also like, how is it asynchronous? Because if the like for the main thread, if the main thread like looks at the particle system, is like, okay, I'm about to update this particle system. Oh, it's still doing things. I'm just gonna skip it this update, and the particle system can keep doing like its simulation and all the stuff it needs, and until the particle system goes, okay, I'm done. I've uploaded the result to Unity. It's now displayed. At that point, whenever next update comes, that starts the new cycle again. So most of it is like kind of on the main thread, but like essentially it happens like every simulation cycle. Like it does like the main thread spins off all the computations to happen. Once they finish and upload the result, on the next update point, it's gonna spin off like another update. So I hope this kind of like, explains how things sort of like work for that. Next question is from Alex2PI. They're asking, so space variables are like more advanced space triggers? I wouldn't compare them to space triggers. They're not really like sending events. It's like sampling values. So you can have a bunch of like shapes in the world, that sort of define like what values are in space, and you can have multiple objects, and like one is maybe sampling here, one is sampling here, one is sampling here, one is sampling here. It's just a system to say there's this value in the space, and then you can ask the system what is the value at this point in space, and it gets a combination of whatever shapes are overlapping that space. You can have a system like you can have the value, for example, do like on change, or you can like drive a boolean and you can send like impulses based on that, but that's that's not part of the spatial variable system. That's like a thing you do on top of it with like whatever value you end up like sampling. Grandy K is asking, so can I do arson in Resonite? I feel like that happens on a daily basis. There's always some
because you were
session.
talking about the fire thing with the variables earlier.
It's just, well, I mean, this kind of happens like a lot. Like people have like all kinds of tools, and like oftentimes we end up like with session that just ends up like either both metaphorically or literally on fire. So like it kind of happens already.
Yeah.
But this makes it easier. This makes it easier to put the session literally on fire. But also check with your host. Make sure the host is okay, and the people around you are okay with like setting everything on fire.
Spatial variable for how hot a session is.
Yeah. Would it be possible? Bitcrack IGN is asking, would it be possible to have particles be spatial volumes? Possibly, yes. It's definitely going to take more computational resources, and it also depends what do you mean by that, because like spatial volumes for what? Like, is it for collisions? Is it for like interacting with things? Is it like for the particles affecting each other? Like that can mean lots of different things.
I think to make like an educated guess on what they're talking about, I think what they mean is being able to define a particle as being a like volume that is like a spatial variable. So like that particle would like, if you're in the influence of like that particle and you have a spatial variable on you, that variable would get triggered by that particle.
I guess so. Like, I mean, again, like this is literally the thing I was talking at the beginning. Provide context for your questions, because like it's really hard to answer these. I mean, possible, yes. Practical question mark. I don't know. We need like details. It might be like we could implement system like that if there's interest for it, but like it might not be the most efficient way to do it. So also depends, what is the use case we want to do. Because like if you're updating a spatial structure that has like 100,000 particles, that's not gonna be fast. And there might be much better ways to like do things, but there might be practical use cases. I would say like with stuff like that, like once the system is out, make a GitHub issue for it.
I could potentially see a use case for the particles being able to sample the spatial variables rather than be spatial variables.
No, that's gonna be effectors. Like the problem there is because like spatial variables, they work with the data model, but the background systems, they like it's not designed for that kind of thing, because like that kind of happens, that runs asynchronously, and it's kind of like what the effectors are gonna be, because the effectors are gonna be synced up with the simulation itself. Spatial variables are not synced up with the particle simulation, so probably that's going to be probably a separate system. Well, was likely going to be a separate system. It's actually a funny thing, because like the acceleration structures I implemented for the spatial variables, and like for the audio system, they actually make it much easier to implement effectors for the particle system too. Because one of the things, like when the particles are being simulated, the spatial structure should not change, like mid simulation. But like for
Yeah.
spatial variables, that would mean we would have to log all the spatial variables and sync them up with this particle system, which we probably don't want to do. You don't want like your
Yeah.
spatial variables to be like locked out by a particle simulation. So the particle simulation is going to have its own system where it creates like a snapshot, and it is kind of used for specifically for that. Butler is asking, are spatial variables always evaluated every frame, or do they evaluate lazily when conditions change, like many flux nodes behave? Right now, they evaluate every frame, so it depends, how many active evaluators you have. Like, they're pretty fast, so like it shouldn't be too bad. What is usually more costly is like moving the shapes, but also it's relatively cheap because of like using the systems. But moving of the shapes, that only happens when the shape changes, and that's kind of the more expensive part. I would like to like eventually add more like another optimization where the samplers, they're gonna register themselves into space, and if we move spatial variables, that's gonna say something in this region changed, and it's only gonna update those specific values. The only problem is, we also need a system for saying this shape changes continuously, because it can change lots of different ways. One is the shape, that its transform changes. It can be that its value changes, but also it could be like, a texture or something that's like, changing. So like, all of that is need to be able to say something in this region changed, reevaluate all the spatial variables in this location. But there will be like a future optimization. I don't think it's like necessary for the system right now. Next question is from Unskilled Wolf. They're asking, I think one of the things that makes Resonite so special is how open accessible everything is. I'm a bit worried about it. With eventual introduction of workshops, stricter licensing systems, paid assets, this openness might be diminished. Has there been any consideration around how to avoid making Resonite feel pay to win? I mean, like, I feel like there's like not really like, if you have like paid assets, it doesn't prevent free assets and free stuff from existing. So I don't think like that's really gonna diminish that. Like, you're probably gonna get more different stuff. Like, you're gonna get like items that are paid, but I don't think it is a detriment. It's like you're getting more stuff, and some of it's like paid, but also it can be reflected in its quality. Plus, it also helps, like, even if you have paid assets, it helps, like, creators, to support themselves, which means they also, make more stuff for the platforms. Like, I feel like overall it's like a benefit to the platform. Plus, something like that will help fund the platform as well, meaning we have more resources to actually implement Resonite itself. I do think, like, it's part of, like, Resonite's nature and the culture is, to keep things open. So, like, I think, like, a lot of people will still make, like, free things, even though, like, to make free samples of their work, like, get people interested in their paid assets as well. But like, I don't see like how there's going to be pay to win, because like, I feel to like really diminish it, we would need to introduce things that like prevent you from like doing free stuff. But like, we don't plan to do that. Like, making paid things and making licenses, that's up to the creators. And it's up to each individual creator, like, do you want your work to be on the platform? Do you want it to be free? Do you want it to be paid? So it's going to be the creator who makes, the decision. And there's always, going to be people who just make stuff for the fun of it. So I think I think it's going to be fine. I think like it's going to be actually better kind of for the platform, especially for the long term, because the more, by creating sort of like an economy for creators, you get more creators overall. So you get like, bigger volume, like bigger absolute volume of free stuff as well, because more creators are interested in Resonite, so more people are making stuff. Like, to give you an example, say like, there's 100 creators right now. It's just made up number. I'm not like pulling it from anything, but say there's 100. Ooh, what was that? There's 100 creators. Oh, I'm happening.
Uh-oh.
Uh,
Uh-oh, the internet's starting to blink out.
oh, okay, it's fine now. Sorry for that. So say like, there's 100 creators that are making stuff, and we don't have a workshop. 100% of the creators are making free stuff. Say we introduce the workshop, Resonite grows significantly, and now we have 1,000 creators. And say 25% of them are making free stuff. So like majority are making paid stuff. 75% are making paid things, but 25% are making free things, which means now you get 250 creators making free things, even though 750 are making, paid stuff. So even if majority of the creators are making paid things, the overall number of creators who are making free stuff is still higher than it was when you could only make free stuff. So I think having the workshop and having incentive for creators to build stuff, it helps. And even if majority of the stuff ends up being paid, you still end up with more overall free stuff than you would have otherwise. And it's the way I kind of like to look at it. Next question is from Bressert. Bressert? I don't know how to pronounce it. I'm sorry. You mentioned using procedural textures as normal map input. Is abusing them? Seem to distinguish between real normal map and procedural texture as being used as a normal map, and mentioned they'll cause a bunch of weirdness. Could you elaborate on these? I don't know what the difference is between real normal map and a texture with color space set to linear, and I've not encountered any weirdness with them, but I want to make sure it's not some unsupported behavior. So normal maps they are very specific type of texture. Essentially, what it is, like for base normal map, each pixel is encoding a vector. So if you have a shape, you have a vector, and that vector is a unit vector. It's a unit vector, and in each unit vector, it has the x, y, z coordinates. And what you can do, you can the simplest thing is you encode these into RGB values. The problem is the vector, the XYZ, it can go positive and negative as well. So you sort of offset it. So instead of going from -1 to +1, with this, it has to go from 0 to 1. So you just sort of you shrink it by half, you offset it, and you encode it that way, and then on the GPU it gets decoded. The other part is for normals, the vectors should be normalized. They need to be unit vectors. And when you generate a normal map, the system will guarantee this is a unit vector. Its length is always 1. The problem is, if you use arbitrary texture, the vector can actually be longer than that or shorter than that, which it'll still do something. It'll do something when you use it with a shader, but maybe with the shader's not expecting that. Maybe it's not normalizing it, or maybe it's combining it in a way. The shader will assume it is a unit vector, and when it's not, the math of it can go wonky in some cases. And it also might not be apparent right away. It may not happen later. But essentially, it's not fitting the criteria of what makes a normal map, which is the normal specifically. The normal map specifically encodes unit vectors that are in specific kind of space. So you can technically plug any texture as a normal map, but if it's not a normal map, you might get graphical weirdness. You might also get weirdness when we make some changes. Say, for example, we change the rendering engine, and now the normals are being processed differently, and now your thing looks different because the normal map is being interpreted weird. You might also get normals that are kind of malformed, so you get lighting artifacts. There can be lots of weirdness things, but the main thing is not fitting the criteria of the normal map. And how normal map, how the vectors are actually encoded. So, I think that's pretty much it. Do you have a thing?
Oh yeah, I was just making a little thing that shows how the red channel moves it left and right, and how the green channel moves it up and down for which way it's pointing.
Yeah. But if you want procedural normal maps, we can add that, and we can make sure those procedural normal maps they they fit, they make actual normal map, a valid normal map. But the current ones, they don't have that guarantee, which means your things can look weird. It's also usually if you use if you use texture like that, usually you run it through some algorithm that actually generates normal map from it and makes sure like it fits all those kind of criteria. So it's one of those cases where you can technically plug it there, but like it can make the math go wonky, and the wonkiness is gonna depend on a specific shader and specific rendering engine. So like you might like want to avoid that and make sure you actually plug in normal maps in there. Otherwise, like you're kind of relying on
You
how
get undefined behavior.
yeah. Sorry. Yeah, we're essentially like it is an undefined behavior, which means it can also change like on you. Next question's from Marty SH. They're asking, I am working on a language inspired by Perflux, and while researching, I read that Perflux built acceleration structures and runs in a stack-based VM. What kind of acceleration structures does it build, and how is the VM structured? So it kind of depends how in depth you want to go, but like it builds like two main types of acceleration structures. One of them is action sequences, so that's for impulses. If you have a bunch of nodes that are like plug into each other, so like so you have a sequence of actions. What it'll do is like you have like A. I'll try to backwards. ABC. It'll look at this and be like, okay, it'll be like, okay, I know that after A always comes B, after B always comes C. I don't need to be figuring that out, at the runtime. So I'm just gonna make a execution list that's like, A, then B, then C. And then like when it runs it, when you send impulse there, it just follows this list that it has sort of pre-built. The other is evaluation sequences. That's like when you evaluate values. So like we have like values that kind of like plug into something, and that's a similar thing. We have like values, and this can actually have like branching too. So like say this is let me replace. Oh, never mind. Let me make this. So say like this is a value. Say like adding two values together, and it can also figure out. It can be like, okay, at the runtime, like it would have to be, okay, I want to evaluate this node evaluates this node evaluates this and this node. So it's, these nodes are kind of evaluating, multiple nodes, but it always goes in the same kind of sequence. So it's like, okay, I'm gonna make a list, I'm gonna evaluate this. Let's say this is A, let's say this is B, then this is plus, and this is C. So it's gonna be, okay, I'm gonna evaluate A, then I'm gonna evaluate B, then I'm gonna evaluate plus, and then I'm gonna evaluate C. So it kind of goes through that sequence of operations, and it figures that out. Ahead of time, rather than doing it at runtime, because like this order of operations never changes. It's not conditional. The other things it's also doing with this kind of system is like it's figuring out how to place these values on a stack, because it is a stack-based machine. So each execution, it has its own stack frame, which is essentially just a sequence of data on the stack. And it's going to be, okay, when this one evaluates, it puts its value here. When this one evaluates, it's going to put its value here. And then when this one evaluates, it actually takes these values from the stack, computes a new value, puts it here, these two go away. Then when this one evaluates, it takes this value and like puts this value here. And then like this one accesses this value at this index of the stack. So it figures out all the addresses, all the offsets, like it figures all of that ahead of time. And then just like, when it comes to the actual execution, it just executes that. Like all the offsets are calculated, all the like, orders of operations are calculated. It figures all of that out, like, during the sort of compilation step. The one step further that it could go is like, when you actually generate machine code for the execution. So it's not sort of, doing that by calling the, methods and stuff. And it's something we would like to do in the future too, like so it actually makes it even faster. But this is what the system does right now. So there's like a lot more kind of details. It has like a lot of like metadata and a lot of like reflection kind of pre-processing, and like there's a lot of complexities to it. But I don't think we have time to really go into that in depth. And I probably
Yeah.
also need to like refresh on that. myself though, because I haven't worked with it in a bit. Next question is from Ozzy. I believe you mentioned being unsure how to implement Doppler for audio. Has there been any advancements for it? I ask because when trying to look up for game engine, it's a whole thing I just can't parse. Yeah, like I have like some ideas, but like it's one of those things. Sometimes like when I'm not sure, it's because like there's kind of multiple ways to approach it, and I'm like I'm not fully sure which one's the best one. I need to play with it a bit and see how it behaves, and then maybe change my mind, based on that. So I have like some ideas, but because like the main issue with it is the way it works in Unity. Is Unity will essentially sample ahead. Like if you have a, why did I delete the brush again? In Unity, say you have you have an audio track, and this is where you're in the audio track, and like it will be playing at this speed normally. If you're moving really fast, it's essentially just gonna move really fast, and then slow down, and like it kind of changes the speed and can sample ahead. The problem is with Resonite, it doesn't quite mesh because its audio is synchronized, and it's kind of like lead to inconsistencies. Also, a lot of the audio sources, the audio like you cannot really go ahead because there's no audio ahead. Like if it's a user voice, you only get like the small section of the voice, and then you waiting for network, for the user to actually send you their voice, to plug more data so you can kind of keep playing. And this works because like if you're playing at normal speed, the new voice, like you're playing, new voice arrives, new playing, new voice arrives. It's literally like building the audio track, like, or you can think of it as like building the audio track, right in front of the playback. And the problem is, if you go way faster, there's no audio because it doesn't exist because the user hasn't made the sounds yet. So like, what do you do in that case? Do you just do silence and so on? So like one of the things I've been kind of thinking about doing, if the system, tries to sample ahead and it's like, I don't have any more audio, I cannot sample ahead. It's sort of gonna, loop this bit. So it's gonna like, it's gonna kind of take the clip and it's gonna like, interpolate it with itself. So like it's gonna sort of repeat, it's not gonna be ideal, but like that's the best you can really do in that case. Or maybe like use algorithm to like stretch the clip. Like been kind of doing some research on like doing like pitch shifting without changing audio, like without changing the length of it. One of the possible approaches is like you cut it into super tiny pieces, and then you essentially repeat those pieces, blending them with each other, sort of stretch it. So that's like one of possible approaches. Another thing I'm kind of thinking is if it can sample ahead, that for sounds that do have a Doppler, it's gonna keep a context where if it samples more data, it keeps it around. That like I have more data, and then like if it slows down, it's gonna use that already pre-sampled data. But it's only gonna work with some things, like with some of the audio clips, and if it would be like too offset, like if based on the data model it should be here, and based on the Doppler it ends up being here, then it's gonna correct that. It's just gonna blend back to where it's supposed to be. So there's like a lot of things, but I'll have to kind of see, how all of it works and how complex I really want to make, because a lot of the times like you don't really, you don't need it because like this Doppler does only a little bit, and it really becomes like more of a problem if you like increase it to like a crazy high value. So it's question, is it like worth the effort for, doing that? Like, doing all these kind of systems, like maybe I can just have it like, even for audio clips, I'll just have it like stretch it, with the mechanism and make the implementation simpler and save a lot of time on the work. So I'll have to see. It's one of those things, like I'll see when I get to it. Next question is from Papaltine. How stable are Resonite cloud storage types? The Pearson Resonite package, are these formats subject to breaking changes over time like ref hacking? I think there was a mention of a custom binary format as future plan. I was wondering if the existing formats would be deprecated in favor of official API for import-export of custom file formats using external tools. So there's actually a lot in this one. Where do I start? So first thing I'm gonna say, ref hacking, the stability of ref hacking has nothing to do with the file format. If we do change the file format, which we probably will, that has nothing to do with ref hacking. Ref hacking is more like of a runtime feature. Well, not even a feature. I shouldn't call it
they're
feature.
asking like they're
No, no,
asking if
no,
the
no, no.
stability is akin to it. Okay.
I know what you're asking. What I'm saying is, it has nothing to do with the file format. Like for ref hacking, it doesn't matter what format you use, because if we change the format, ref hacking still gonna be unsupported. It doesn't interact with each other. Similarly for other features that we do support, it has nothing to do with the format itself. Like the stability of the format and stability of features, that's a separate thing. So you need to think about them, as two kind of separate things. But for both, we can talk about the stability of them, but there are separate things. For the formats itself, they like .brson, for example, it is considered sort of internal format. So we Resonite generally we're committed to long-term stability. And since this is how we store data, even when we do introduce new format, we are gonna support at least reading the old format and converting it. So what will probably happen is we introduce a new format, we keep the functionality to read the old format, but we might nuke the ability to store in it because we don't need it anymore. So if you load things with the old format and you save them again, it's going to be saved in the new format. So it's kind of similar, for example, how the Minecraft handles it, where you can load the old maps, but it saves them into the new format. That way, your stuff, the Resonite packages, the items, those are still gonna be supported, but maybe the ability to save in that format is nuked. So if you rely on the format, being able to write into it, that can break. Also, we might, if there's any new features that we introduce, they might not exist for the format. So if you make for example, your custom exporter that exports, in the old data format, you might not be able to export some things because the old format does not support it anymore. It only supports old stuff. So at the very least, what we will do is have ability to load all things in the format, but relying on it, for long-term support, to be able to import and export, some of it might go away. We might just be this is now a legacy format. We're not saving any more data in this format. We're actually removing the ability to save in it. We only support reading it, and we are not gonna upkeep it. We just have it there to support loading already saved things when it was the main format. When you look at the features themselves, that is separate. Because the format is just a way to kind of serialize the data, but the format, it doesn't care about any specific features or non-features. It's just a way to kind of take the structure, put it into file, and then load it back. But the format, to the file format, what the specific features do and how those features maintain their compatibility, that's opaque. It doesn't care about that. The format essentially is, I have for example, a data of this type, type that is named, grabbable, for example, for the grabbable component, and it has a value of Boolean of this value and this thing, but it doesn't know what grabbable is. It doesn't know what any of the components are. It just stores them, it kind of maps them, and when the system loads it, we have a separate system that for the components, if we make breaking changes, we have an upgrade mechanism for those, but it's independent of the format. The format is literally just I have this value of this name of this thing. The format doesn't care what it does. It's the component, when it loads, for example, when we make upgrades to the grabbable component. When it loads, it looks, okay, I've been loaded from this version. I need to make these changes to these values to upgrade myself to keep working with whatever functional changes we made. So there's a separate thing, and that doesn't depend on the format. The new format is gonna do the same thing. It's gonna be I have component of this name with these values. When it loads, it just gives the values, and then the component decides how to upgrade itself. And for the mechanism, it doesn't. Similarly, how the format doesn't care about the upgrade mechanism of the components. The component doesn't care what format it was loaded from. It only cares, okay, I've been loaded from this version of Resonite. I need to perform these upgrades. I don't care if that was from this format or this format. It's it's like a separation layer. The third part for this is official API, because APIs also come with their own kind of import export things. That kind of overlaps a little bit with the components, but it's if there's an API, we will usually make sure that API has some is maintained. So if you some calls, you can upgrade your things. So I hope that kind of answers that. Yeah, I would say, in short, don't depend on you can make toolings, but we don't make guarantees that that specific format is gonna have all the capabilities going forward. But we do make the guarantee that stuff you've made and you saved with versions where it is the format, that will keep working. So you'll be able to import the Resonite packages. You'll be able to spawn stuff from Cloud, because Cloud actually uses the exact same formats as the Resonite packages. So you'll still be able to import those. We maintain compatibility for those. But if you build tools, that rely on that format, supporting both import and export forever, we don't guarantee that. We have a question for Sarah. Check the Froox that is asking, did Sarah end up being the one to fine-tuning the reverb conversion because of his big ears? I might be muted.
I am muted. Thank you. I said you also have big ass ears, pal. Well, I guess you have holes in them. I guess mine don't. So I guess the sound goes in them better.
Yes. Some of the sounds goes through for mine.
Can you hang things between those? Is wearing earrings really easy for you?
People keep wanting to put a rope in the ears and tie them together, or stick things through the holes. I'm like, wow.
Well, what if you don't? You got holes in your ears. You don't want people to put things in them.
It's for better Wi-Fi reception.
Yeah.
Next question is from Check the Fox Author. Also, more serious question. Will we eventually be able to create custom shapes or spatial variables and parameterize how the value is determined at each point within the shape? We don't have any specific plans for that. I mean, potentially, yes, we could expose the API, make it so you can define you could define it with protoflags, or define it with WebAssembly, have an API. So I see that as a possibility, but we don't have a specific plan for it right now. I would say there's a feature request for the future, and will probably depend on a bunch of other things being done first. Next question is, Garnier, will there be a mesh spatial variable to go along with primitive shapes? There won't be, because meshes have no volume. So if you think about a mesh, if you have a sphere, this is you can define a volume. But if you have a mesh, say imagine these are triangles. There's no volume. Meshes have no volume. There's just a infinitely thin shell, which means if you sample here, you're not gonna get anything because you're not on the shell. The only thing we could do is a convex hull, maybe, because with convex hulls do have a volume, but meshes don't, which means they cannot be used for spatial variables. Actually, the only thing, they could potentially be used in some limited, very specific way, if you were if you say this is my volume, this is my mesh here, and what you want to do is you project it onto a mesh. But then also the question is there's more why that actually wouldn't be using it. Never mind, wouldn't be using the mesh. Yeah, I'm just gonna say no. Next question. Next question from Matthias. So would it be possible to plug in a generic sign instance field function into spatial variables once we get nested nodes? I mean, that's the same answer to like Jack's question. Is like we will need to provide API because spatial variables, they have an API where like it says like, this is my bounding box, and then it's like a sample. It's like, okay, I'm sampling, this is the bounding box, and there's like, whatever shape you want, and you essentially get, okay, I'm sampling at this point, and it's up to your function to figure out, what value you get, and also figure out, is this still within the shape or not? Because the system, it will do basic culling, because like even for example sphere has a bounding box. So if it samples here, it's like, okay, yes, there's a value here. If it samples here, it's going to be, okay, it is within the bounding box, but it's outside of the sphere. I'm outside of the shape, you shouldn't sample that. So if you provide those functions, you can technically do whatever you want, there. So if we do provide an API, or when we provide an API, you'll be able to like, do whatever logic you want. Oh my god, we just got to this subscription. We got like, I don't know how long ago. Thank you again for the subscriptions. Been Terramon saying been a while since I've been all in live by Hey Folks.
We have a lot of questions and 25 minutes left.
We might need to start speeding through these. So I would say if you're asking questions at this point, we might not be able to get to those. But hey, like, there's gonna be the Reddit AMA, like, some during that, once it's announced. Next questions from Grand K. Would foveated rendering be looked into for devices runtimes that support it, since it's needed to be implemented by runtime and again for it to work? We were kind of looked into it. The main thing is right now, like, one, it doesn't work out of the box with deferred rendering, which is what we use, which makes things a little bit more complicated. The other part is right now we are CPU bound, in more cases than GPU bound, which means it doesn't have as a big benefit right now. But like if it once that kind of changes, we might look into it. But I would say probably not until we switch graphics engine. Next questions from Kai Volps. I'm curious about one thing. If a custom rendering engine does not come out, and since you are using Unity as a rendering backend, would you guys switch to using Unity 7 since Unity says they are switching core CLR in that version? No, we are going to be switching rendering engine. Like, we're already very close to switching to like .NET 9, because after audio is done, then it's the splitting. The problem is also the newer versions of Unity, they actually break a lot of stuff as well that we use. So like, and there's like, we have like, we're at the point like where I've said this like earlier, like if we had half the reasons to switch away from Unity, we would still have way too many reasons to switch away from Unity. So like, one thing changing is not gonna change our mind about switching away. We need like full control over the rendering engine. We want like, because we want to do features like, doing custom shaders. Again, very difficult with Unity. We need like to have control how the rendering works. We need specific rendering pipeline. There's a lot of licensing issues with Unity where they have like suddenly changed things, and they would charge, like they would literally wanted to charge companies more than they make, and after they said more than once that they're not gonna do certain things. So like, they're not a company we want to kind of keep working with. Like, we don't trust them.
We need a stable API too.
Yes. So it's like, no, we're 100% switching away from Unity. The form it might happen might change, but we are switching away from Unity. UK is asking, how do you get started using spherical harmonics? Depends what you want to use them for, because you can use them for lots of different things. If you want for ambient lighting, I recommend checking the video on the ambient lighting on our YouTube channel, because we did kind of cover that. It also covers, some of the other use cases where you can, sample it, like, with protoflags for arbitrary systems. So I recommend checking that one out. Next questions from AlexBoo23. The YouTube DLP browser cookie thing is broken for most browsers because they encrypted all the cookies for safety stealers. Would make it so you can fetch any video useless. Firefox Opera are the only two that still work. Should I make a report about it so we can track it? I would say make that report with YouTube DLP. We are not implementing this functionally on our end. We're just telling YouTube DLP, fetch the cookies. So they are the ones who need to implement fixes for that. So make the report on their GitHub. Once they do fix it or make workarounds for it, we can implement it on our end, but until YouTube DLP actually supports that, like, we can't really do much. Next question's from Mintshock. The only solutions to complete the burn ripping would be if game could be cloud gaming stream exclusive, right? Because the game would be rendered on server as UDEF, think and 1% streamed clients. Yeah, that's pretty much what I said like during the thing. Like you have to like host everything and make sure like the user never actually gets the game, never gets the assets, and gets video stream. But like then you need latency, you need like infrastructure all over the world so people can play it. And even then, like, is it probably not good for VR? So it's not really feasible, unfortunately. Oh jeez. Sorry. Granius K is asking, will there be Preflux nodes to use slot's position to read write special variable? You just use the component for that, but there will be a Protoflux node where you plug a position in word space and just sample the value. You don't need a slot for that. Like the component that drives the value, like it just uses the slot position. But if you use a Protoflux node, then plug whatever position you want and sample there. You could even sample. You can do a for loop and sample a bunch of different points in that too.
Ooh.
Next question is from Bitcrack IGN. Follow-up for a question about point shapes for spatial variables. I guess easiest way to understand what I mean is like a sphere of infinite size, like putting multiple points on an infinite gradient texture. Sorry if it might make it more confusing. Yeah, I don't really like. You could like make like a shape that's really big. I don't know. Like infinite shape, by definition, is infinite. Like so like it makes it so you cannot really get 2 points within that shape because like if you have a sphere, like have a point here, then you can like say like you interpolate the value between the center and this, and it can be okay. I'm 50%, 0.5 like between the center and the outer sphere. But if this is at infinity, then this point is at infinity, this point is at infinity, every single point other than 0 is infinity, and 0 is just gonna be nonsense. So like that doesn't really work. Like you cannot really have gradients like that. Sorry, I got what I meant. Well, I have many good ideas for it. Something like I could have used. I don't quite understand because like I'm confused. I'm actually even more confused because
So
like you can do.
They're talking about desampling. Like
Yeah.
if the particle system sampled the spatial variables, so like if
Oh,
the
there's a
embers
particle
of a fire
system.
entered into like a space or something, then the embers would light up when they're close to the variable.
We could make a system for it. I would say make a GitHub issue for it. Like make a GitHub issue for it. Like once it comes out, it could be a cool use case. Hammer, I remember something about PLB and RFX apply not being thread safe. What is your tentative solution to deal with limitation? I'll literally just wrap it around a log. Like I'm thinking about like adding pooling to it, but like right now it's fine without it because like all the other parts are still multi-threaded. So like, and people have tested audio with like huge amounts of audio sources, and it's still pretty fast. So like I'll probably leave it that way until it becomes a problem. Which it might not be. Next, BD underscore deploy. Oh.
Sorry.
Yeah, BD underscore is asking, Doppler effects, would this not be just a matter of accurately simulating the path delay of audio and the change when you move in air? No, this like, it's not the issue is not figuring out, the amount of Doppler you want, because that's the easy part. You just like there's a formula for that. We figure out, how far you're moving. The problem is, if you're moving towards an audio source, it essentially sort of speeds up. It goes faster. And like I mentioned, if you have, for example, voice audio data, you might have this part of the buffer, but this audio hasn't arrived yet, and you might speed up so fast that you go here, and you literally don't have the audio data for where your playback is supposed to be on the speed you're going at. Which means, we have to work with whatever audio data you have, and that's, where the gist of the problem is. So, like, figuring out, like, how fast it needs to be playing, that's the easy part. Figuring out what to do when you don't have the audio data there, that's the hard part. Navy 3001, how long it will take to get onto Net 9 once the audio system is live? I don't know yet. I hope like it's gonna be like a month or so, but like it's one of those things, where we don't know. It's like it's still like a complex project, and a lot of the work, it can end up like having a lot of like undiscovered work. So there can be complexities that arise during that process. So like, we generally don't like giving estimates because we literally don't know, and I don't want to be like making up a number. Um, Daniel 36 1911 is asking, are you all thinking about going to make mobile apps for phone and Snowball Quest? Is that hardware too limiting? So do you mean like playing actual Resonite, or do you mean like, for example, having like a messenger app? Because those are like, different things. I would say the messenger app, that's much easier. Like, and like I would like us to have something like that officially, so we can, chat with people and like, do things and so on. That would be pretty neat. Having like a full Resonite is definitely a little bit harder. It's kind of similar to like, the limitations for the Quest. We definitely need to have like a bunch of optimizations go through, and we also need content segregation because your phone cannot handle the same amount of stuff that your PC can, no matter how many optimizations you do. So the content needs to be sort of like, separated between the two platforms. But I would definitely love to have both. I think the messenger one is gonna be like, one that's more feasible to happen in short reach time, but we also don't have people to work on it right now, so we'll see. Next one's from Ace on Twitch 17 is asking, in the event that something tragic happens in the long run, Froox is no longer with us, what would happen to Resonate and Froox engine? Will someone else manage the engine? Will Resonate completely shut down? I mean, it's kind of hard to say, but like we do have like number of team members that have like full access to everything, so they could keep going with things. I don't know how things would look like, but technically, it can keep going. Next question is from Grand UK. Is a combination of spatial variable and value user override possible, where spatial variable is different for each user checking it? Yep, you can do that. The value on the spatial variable, it's it's just a field like any other, so you can derive it, you can like do value as you override. So that's a perfectly valid use case. Assuming you of course have to like know that like I want this value to be different for each user. Next question is from Cave Extra Space. Any plans to update the current way mesh collision is handled? I often clip through mesh collision, and for terrain geometry, I cannot just raw and convex all primitive shapes. Having option for given mesh collision volume, like primitives I already have, would help a lot. So you cannot really give mesh. So again, it's like one of those questions where there's like multiple things in it. One, you cannot give meshes volume. That's just not how it works mathematically. If you want to do that, you use convex halves. Those have volume, but also like more limitations. The other part is you don't need to give them volumes. There are things in the Beppo physics engine that actually make the use like continuous collision checking that improve so you don't clip through things. Is at the cost of extra performance, but it can be done. So we don't plan like changing because like we don't actually handle the mesh collision ourselves. That's handled by the physics engine, but there's also like configuration things for like how the collision is checked that can improve this behavior. Next question is from Gunnar K. How far have you gotten with IPC theory for the splitting? Will it be a bit of theory after audio or straight implementation? Definitely theory as well. Like I do have like some general idea, but there like needs to be like I didn't mean to do that. But there's definitely like work. I actually need to kind of jump into like test some things and like do full design of it, how exactly it's gonna communicate. So yeah, there's like design work that needs to happen, and usually that happens very close, like right before the implementation. There's like general bits, like things are sort of architectured for other systems, so it fits into that. But the actual all the details of the implementations is done before the implementation, so there's gonna be a bunch of this design phase. Actually, we're kind of getting through these. PD underscore. Any plans to implement bake lighting after rendering engine switch? Yeah, that's definitely something we'd like to introduce. No specific timeline though. Ozzy's asking, hopefully I can squeeze one last question. How many audio sources does current audio system allow? I remember asking around a cubic mix numbers. Actually, right now on the builds, it's configurable. I think you can set it all the way to 512, like concurrent. We'll see, like, if we keep that setting or
in the
not.
vanilla.
In the vanilla. Oh, I don't remember. I think it's 32. I don't remember.
Yeah, it's something like I've seen it max out around like 50 something. I don't know.
Maybe
I think
64.
maybe there's just some, yeah, probably.
Yeah, I don't remember, unfortunately. Ground UK is asking, are multiple audio outputs single-based audio channels in pre-release yet? They're not, but I've like implemented some things that are necessary for that. I need a little bit more so you can actually sell, you know, other audio devices, but it's very close to having that. So you'll actually be able to be like, the audio, you know, for the camera, it's going to output a different audio device. So the camera audio, you know, is like rendered from like in its viewpoint. So you get like you'll get me spatialized, you get Sire spatialized, and for you in the headset, you'll still hear it normally. So, so it's like that's gonna help make streaming a lot easier. I actually got through questions pretty quick. We got like 10 minutes left. So if you want, you can ask more questions. We have time for more. Let's see. Ace on Twitch 17, I heard in previous streams you talking about UI redesign. What are your current ideas for it, and how would you see it in the long run? So we already like been doing a bunch of like UI redesign. It's just like, you know, it's more of a like on and off thing. We have like big general plans, but like the gist of what we want to do with the UI is make it, when you first get into Resonite, make it as simple as possible. Make it, you know, so you have your basic stuff, you can start socializing with people, you know, you can start like going into worlds, you can like, you know, do all the basic stuff, but like not have like much other than that. But then, as you kind of keep using the platform more and more, make it so you can make the UI kind of grow with you and adapt with you. And in order to do that, we actually have a system called facets. Facets, they're sort of like, you know, these like little containers of UI, and we want like the default UI to have like, you know, simple configuration, but like once you start doing things, you'll be able to like, okay, I'm gonna find this piece of UI, you know, this for this thing I want to do, and plop it in there, maybe plop it in there. And what we've been sort of doing is reworking all the UIs that we have to use that kind of, you know, principle. And actually, I can give you like a live showcase of this. If I render private UI and this covers the camera, sorry, I'm gonna switch to smooth POV. You can kind of, you know, see our stuff. If I open the dash, like there's a bunch of like old UIs, like the inventory doesn't use facets, but for example, settings, we reworked this to use facets. So for example, you know, say there's a setting I really like to use frequently. It's also another thing. This UI, it uses something called data feeds. So instead of like, you know, the UI being sort of all generated by code, a lot of these pieces, they are made by our art team. And there's a system that just generates, you know, feed of like sort of bindings, like, you know, values that need to change, and then the actual pieces of UI, they are made in-game, which makes them, you know, much easier and much fancier. And there's like a mechanism we want to like do for other UIs as well, because like all of this, for example, inventory, this is generated from code. This is generated from code, and making UI in code, it's painful. It's very, very painful. It's hard to make like a really good looking like UI, like for things. And it's hard to iterate. Versus this, you know, this is, you know, there's like really nice animations, you know, there's like all this stuff. We want to use this mechanism where inventory is also going to be using data feed, for example. Like this is going to be feed of items, there's going to be feed of path, you know. And we just have the content team design individual pieces of UI to like, you know, put everything together. And on the code side, we're going to do more of a, you know, more just kind of the structure of it, you know, the sort of like raw data that goes into it. But another cool thing, you know, going back to the facets is like, say, you know, you use some piece of UI, like, you know, some setting, you use it like often. So what you can do is, you know, you can literally take a piece. If I switch this to UI edit mode, I can be like, okay, like I like my master volume, and I'm just gonna go on my screen, and I'm just gonna, drag and drop it here. There we go. And I can change my volume. If I turn this off, I have quick access to it. Or even cooler, if you enable, and I think it's user interface, there should be setting for facet anchors. To enable facet anchors, I have this on. The other button will then toggle these. And you can see I have mine already kind of customized. I have I have a very quick access to a lot of the common functionality I use. I can change the volume. I can change my status. I have these controls don't report battery, but I have lots of settings available. And this is sort of the principle we want to use, is because these start empty, and you can start sort of populating them with stuff you use frequently, and adjust it to however you like to use Resonite. We'll do all of that for the other pieces of UI as well, for example inventory. Once we rework the inventory with the new system, what you'll be able to do is you can literally plop out a piece of inventory, put it on your hand, so you have quick access to it. Maybe put it somewhere else. You can kind of customize it. So checking the time, we've got 4 minutes. That's one of the kind of principles we want to kind of follow, is make the UI very modular, make it so the content team is actually able to build the visuals, and we don't have to painstakingly try to make it in the code. Make it a little more dynamic and make it a little more customizable. So you can make your own versions of it too, or you can customize it. Put, if you use pieces of UI frequently, just put them in places. Make the UI kind of grow with you, because oftentimes people are you should make a toggle, simple and advanced mode. And for me, that feels it feels too black and white. It's because people use Resonite different. They use it for different reasons. Same for example with the streamer UI. Say you're a streamer, you might want to take the streaming UI and maybe plop it on your hand, so you have quick access to some of the common functions for the camera. Maybe you want to reorganize it, so you adjust Resonite for that. Maybe you're a builder, so you put your inventory full of tools on your hand, so you have super quick access to them. We want to make the UI so it kind of grows with you and how you use Resonite. And so it's also a more gradual process. You kind of customize it as you go. Everybody kind of starts with a simple one, and then you kind of keep adjusting and building in. So there's a little more on the topic, but we don't have super much time, so I hope this kind of helps give a better idea on it. Next question. Oh, there's not a question. Seconded simplistic UI, make endless UI. BD underscore is asking, the current inventory browser is a bit of pain to reorganize currently, and in near-term plans to improve it. Depends what you mean by near-term. I don't know what it means, a month, 3 months, 6 months. We don't want to improve it. No specific timeline. We would like to do it as soon as we can. Don't know if it's near-term or not. But yeah, the inventory UI is one of the oldest and crustiest pieces of code. It's very painful to work with. So we're gonna throw it into the fire and rework it with the data feeds. Grand UK is asking, will moving, copying, symlinking several objects be thinking to be covered inventory system to make it more similar to normal file systems? So again, copying, yes. Moving, yes. Symlinking, don't know. Maybe. I would say there would be a GitHub request. I mean, you can kind of do sort of symlinking, well, with the folders, but not quite. Grand UK, how do you feel if someone made a whole game in Resonite, something like Amnesia, Dark Descent, Legends of Ocarina of Time? That'd be really cool. I would definitely love to see that, because we're kind of making Resonite, be a game engine. I would say there are some sort of simpler games, but we definitely want to see more. Next question from Ozzy, perhaps a subjective, strange question, but why does inventory stutter so much when loading a lot of items? Settings page is a lot more complex. Video X, inventory feels like it hurts more. Lots of reasons. There's loading lots of assets, for thumbnails, but it's also doing a lot of crusty stuff. Next question from Grand UK, could it be a thing where you can turn off certain facet anchors you don't use, so not have all of them are turned on? I mean, if you don't use them, I don't know what you mean by exactly turning them off, because you can just not put stuff on them. Qualification on being able to turn on back hand facet anchors, not arm facet anchors. I mean, just not put stuff on them, I think. Would be probably the qualification. Grand OK, will context page be proximal to inventory? Yes, yeah. So right now, the old pieces of UI is like inventory, contact, session, file browser. Settings have been reworked. World technically has been reworked, but they're also gonna rework it a little bit again to like, because the world was sort of like a prototype of like concept of data feeds, almost like it doesn't use data feeds, but like it uses some similar principles. And we want to actually rework it so it just uses just data feeds. So that's also going to be technically reworked. So pretty much like most of the UIs other than settings is going to be reworked. With that, this is our time. So sorry, like we cannot answer any more questions at this point. Thank you very much, like for joining. Thank you for asking all the questions. I hope like good enjoyed enjoyed the answers. We'll figure out somebody to rate as well. Let's see if anybody's streaming Resonite. There. Actually, I don't know if there's gonna be like a Resonance next week. Probably yes. It might be. Okay, there's only creator jam. It's possible it might not be. Because we might like go somewhere. So we'll see. Either it happens or it doesn't. Thank you very much for everybody for watching us. Thank you for supporting the platform, helping the development. Thanks Sairo for being here helping me answer questions.
Yeah.
And also again there's gonna be an announcement, but we're gonna start doing some Reddit AMAs. So that's gonna be another avenue to ask a bunch of questions, talk with us. So keep an eye out on that one, and also another pre-release build with special variables, more audio. And if you help us test audio, that's it's gonna help you get it done sooner, which means we get to the split innings soon, hopefully. So yeah, thank you so much. You can always check more stuff on our Discord. Thank you for supporting us, whether it's on Patreon or Stripe. Also, if you do support us on Patreon, consider switching to Stripe on the same tier, because we actually get more money out of that. Patreon takes about 15%, Stripe gets up around 5%. So we get 10% more, for what you're paying, which adds up and helps us a lot. So thank you very much. I'm gonna rate Creator Jam. Let's start it down. There we go. And I will probably see you next week. We might not see you next week, depending how stuff goes. We'll see. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you, for all the questions and everything. And go say hi to Medra. Bye.
Bye bye.